Mass housing, as we know it today, is a phenomenon of the urbanized world. It consists of large-scale and planned residential quarters of high density. Time-wise, mass housing is a phenomenon that originates from the 20th century. Today, urban managers and designers are increasingly confronted with 20th century mass housing complexes. Their life cycle currently requires urgent action. Yet, for reasons of embodied energy and natural resources, demolition hardly is an option. Besides, there may also be economic, social and even cultural reasons to prolong their life cycle. In this video, we will explore how mass housing emerged in the Dutch context, its current cultural position and its future perspective. If demolition is no option, then how should we deal with these remains of a past era that is no longer ours? Mass housing in the Netherlands largely is social housing, initially intended to provide shelter for low-income groups. However, the social housing concept goes beyond the individual need for shelter. It aims to create the conditions for a sound social and economic urban development. Social housing, thus interpreted, is a public need and serves more than only the low-income groups. The history of social housing in the Netherlands is largely determined by the Housing Act of 1901. In this act, local authorities were made responsible for a sound housing within the borders of their municipality, by means of regulations and subsidies. One of the main instruments provided by this new act was the extension plan, which in essence became a land use plan. It was actually the beginning of Dutch spatial planning. This Housing Act of 1901 was largely a response to the 19th century living conditions in the largest cities. Rapid urbanization, resulting from industrialization, created a huge housing shortage. This in turn caused unacceptable hygienic misery and social corruption, and besides obstructed economic development. The Housing Act resulted in ambitious expansions of the ever-growing cities. The famous Amsterdam Extension Plan of 1935 is one of the many examples. A new urban typology emerged of vast social housing precincts designed along monumental axes with aesthetic and daring architectural features, all to provide an emerging working class with the means for social and moral edification. A modernist movement that declared itself during the interbellum period molded the new mass housing typology according to functionality in use and design. New building materials like concrete and steel served their ideals. The new materials allowed high-rise structures and standardized building. After the Second World War, the modernist ideals of the functional city came to full expression. In the functional city, housing, industry and leisure were separated. The residential quarter of Pendrecht in Rotterdam is a good example. It was constructed in the 1950s according to these ideas. Parallel to this modernist mass housing developments, a counter-movement emerged among the adherents of the Garden City. This movement found its base at the very end of the 19th century in England and Germany. In distinction to the modernist ideals, it returned to a vernacular form using traditional building materials like bricks, tiles and wood. In town planning, the focus was on the human scale, spatial hierarchy and contrast. One of the pioneering Dutch examples is the garden village at Lansing. It was constructed in 1911 to accommodate the factory workers in the city of Hengelo. It features single-family dwellings in a park-like environment. Today, this mass housing of the 20th century, erected with such great idealism, no longer serves the current needs to all extent. In a post-industrial economy, the separation of function is less relevant. Meanwhile, a mass culture is slowly being replaced by a more individualist culture, asking for more diversity. The vast and monotonous housing precincts turned out to be vulnerable for ethnic segregation, obstructing the aspirations for an inclusive society. The current generation of inhabitants has other requests for comfort than earlier generations. And besides, the life cycle of large parts of this 20th century building stock is in need for maintenance, repair, or restoration.
Now that you have heard what the past and present of Dutch mass housing heritage is, we should ask ourselves what the future holds for it. Or maybe the better question is to ask, what can heritage do for our future? What are the opportunities and limitations? Let's look at a famous housing project that was recently given a new lease on life while adapting it to current physical and socio-economic needs. The Justus van Everquater in Rotterdam was revolutionary when it was completed in 1921. Its aerial street effectively doubled up the number of homes that could be realized here. The complex was also provided with unknown comfort in the form of communal central heating linked with a communal bathhouse and laundry. This made the block a huge success. But by the 1980s, it had become outdated. A large, expensive renovation in the 1980s tried to modernize the block, to make it fit the ideals of that time. But this renovation failed dismally, and by the mid-1990s, the block, already listed as a monument, was abandoned. No one knew how to continue. Proposals were made again to modernize it, but it was only once the essential qualities of this building as heritage were rediscovered that a way forward was found. With the slogan 100% monument, the new in Dutch meaning now, the building was restored to its former glory, while at the same time it was provided with cutting-edge energy technologies, which restored the communal character that its original energy system gave it. Now, 10 years later, the building is thriving. What lessons can we learn? Well, heritage is often seen as halting change or development, and municipalities and other authorities try to manage change through legislation and bylaws. This is fully justified because by careful curation of housing heritage, we can at the most basic level extend the use of the embodied energy and therefore environmental cost. But housing heritage is also living heritage because it is lived-in heritage. The most important lessons the Eustace case can teach us is that we can embrace change if we embrace the original ideas. Then heritage can become an opportunity for progress. To do so, we need to realign our view to see the essential heritage qualities as an already made economic and ecological investment with social capital that can be recycled or even better, upcycled to accomplish desired change. Housing heritage is a gift of character, of beauty, and is an anchor of continuity in an ever-changing world.